I'm Pete Nguyen. I'm the co-founder and chief creative officer here at Sea Change Brewing Co. We started Sea Change back in 2017 with Ian McIntosh, which is the guy who kind of put the idea together, wanting to start a brewery. Me and Ian, we've been friends for quite a while before that, and we worked in a bunch of different ways together, but mainly we were musicians that played together in different bands, but we did shows together. I worked on a lot of his album covers and posters and merchandise artwork, and we kind of created quite a bond starting off. So when he decided he wanted to get into the brewing world, he kind of assembled a team of like-minded thinkers to build this whole brewery together with. And it was the summer of 2017, and I just got married and about to go on my honeymoon. And he kind of popped the second biggest question of my life, which is, "You want to start a brewery with me?" And I said yes to that. So once I got back from my honeymoon, we kind of got working on the brand and the brewing, and basically we've been an owner operated brewery since the beginning. I'm involved in all the creative, the marketing, all the art that goes along with it. Ian and Jay Sparrow, they did a lot of the sort of business side and the hospitality production of everything. And then Taylor Fall came in as our head brewer and partner as well. And we all sort of created this tap room here all together. We put up the drywall ourselves, we ground the floors, we um, did all the groundwork to get the pipes in and all the brewery equipment in, did all the artwork, and we started brewing just one single beer. It was a simple blonde ale. There was not much to it, didn't really have a name, didn't really have a brand. Um, and we kind of launched that just in keg format for bars and restaurants. We knew a lot of the people working in the hospitality industry, so it was easy to get our foot in the door with a couple spots that we really enjoyed. And while we were doing that, we were working hard on opening this tap room. This location, I'd like to think that it was a great plan to kind of build this whole section of Edmonton up to being a brewery district. But when we got this location, really, it was the only place we could get. And Ian kind of went ahead and I believe he put a lease on it and signed all the paperwork before he even put the company together. So we were kind of locked in. Originally, it was, I believe it was a bakery, and then it was kind of just sitting empty for the past while. So when we took over, it was just an empty slate, had a lot of junk in here, and we just kind of moved it out. As far as zoning goes, I believe it was already set to be a food production space. So it wasn't too hard to get things rolling here. The biggest thing was converting just an empty warehouse industrial into a place that did have all the proper drainage and setups to put a brewery in here. Um, when we started, we figured that we'd have kind of a nice little tap room. And at the time, we still thought about it as a tasting room. We were probably I want to say we were about the sixth brewery that ever opened up in Edmonton. So we were quite fresh, and this was just fresh out of the rule changes with a little bit of time. So there wasn't really a precedent for super successful tap rooms or massive numbers in craft brewing. So we kind of started with whatever we knew from other provinces and other cities that we visited. But we thought, a modest little tap room would do. Um, Once we opened up, I think it was August of 2018, we opened up our tap room, and it was just a massive success. We had a lot of time to build up our brand and figure out how we want to present ourselves over the past year. Um, and quite honestly, all we did was do the things that we thought we would enjoy in a tap room, in a room, in a brand with any beer. And we kind of just went with our gut. And when we launched, it was a crazy success. So we went from this small team of owner operators into quite a massive team over the past 6 years. You know, learning as much as we could, filling all the voids that we weren't very good at, and creating sort of this, semi big small company. Initially, our brewing space was quite small, and we never really thought we'd grow into it as fast as we did. So we had this little tiny system, and at the time, we weren't really doing any canning either. we kind of stuck to doing kegs, and that's what we were good at. So even our first and second beer, it was a blonde ale and an Irish red ale. They were all sort of brand specific. There was no name, there was nothing to it, and we thought we'd keep a very simple offering to kind of just be that house beer for a lot of spaces. Since then, we've developed a ton of different brands that we've tied to the community. We tied to things that we felt really strong about, and made some interesting beers that really blew up. And what went from probably a 4,000 square foot production space ended up being about 18,000 square feet in our new larger production facility just down the road. And going from maybe it was probably two brewers and a packaging guy to now well over 15 people working just in the back. So that was a huge, huge change for us. Um, as far as beers go, we learned a lot from being in a band and sort of hustling to promote your music. And we always knew that you could be the greatest musician and have the greatest song ever written, but if no one hears about it, it doesn't really mean much. So we were huge sticklers on trying to figure out something more interesting than just being a blonde ale or an Irish red ale. Building a stronger brand and building more iconic imagery. So once we kind of got over that initial sort of launch, we decided to focus on really making the iconic beers that we're known for today. One of my favorites being the Wolf, and I remember that was a huge breakthrough when we were experimenting with it's a hazy pale ale, and we hit the recipe and it just felt right. So we gave it sort of this, at the time, an ominous name, the Wolf. It had really no meaning at the time. We just thought it'd be something that we find would be an interesting thing that we would love to drink, and we put it in sort of this matte black label with a gold wolf on it, and it's become iconic in a lot of ways for our brand. And once the liquid, like the beer, was fantastic, the label worked out really well, and we just kind of launched with that. Everything sort of followed that same formula. As far as branding goes, my focus as an artist designer is to kind of do the things that make me most excited. I feel like that's the best way to genuinely put forward anything that you're building. And for us, we were ingrained in this sort of punk rock world, traditional tattoos, and things like that. And it always focused around having a really strong central image. It's the thing that made merchandise really sell for us when we were bands, and album covers, and we're thinking about all these little variations of our product. So we kind of went with that. We went with the band model and how to promote ourselves. We did a lot of branding exercises that were mostly grassroots marketing. So we've never really paid for a bunch of ads. We never really did those things, but we did a lot of fun stunts and found interesting ways to get people interested in our product. Yeah, Sea Change is it's an interesting name considering that we're in the middle of Alberta. But it was actually Ian McIntosh's idea from the get-go. He's had the name in the back of his head for a long time, and it was based off of I believe it was sort of, they called it like kind of like a luxury boat that you can live on, but he kind of grew up there for a number of years in his childhood, and it's still around today. We have a little bit of information on the wall here from a scrapbook that sort of outlines the history of the boat itself, and it hosted a bunch of celebrities and things like that in the past. So there was no other ties to it other than he had a relationship growing up with it, and we felt like as an Alberta brewery, it kind of gave us a cachet, being sort of a West Coast brand that isn't quite West Coast. When COVID hit, it completely changed our business. We were initially so focused on doing draft that we never really put a lot of emphasis into canning. Mostly it was just a financial barrier to get completely into canning. So there was a point before COVID when we first started that we had this little canning line in the back that we were working on. It was a bottling filler, and we were opening up. Our tap room was doing quite well, and we couldn't fill the beer fast enough for it to sell. So we kind of looked at that as sort of like a problematic thing until we were able to get a proper canning line and upscale our production. But once COVID hit, we went from doing 90% of our business in kegs to zero. So we had to kind of figure out how to balance that out. And I remember we laid off about 30 some employees at that time because our tap rooms weren't existing, and we were really racking our brain on how to make it work. And we basically called in West Coast Canning, which is Vessel now. They did their mobile canning, and they came in and we converted over our beers and tanks all the way to our canned products, and we were pumping out quite a bit of cans. Since the shutdown of COVID, we started up a program where we were delivering beer for zero fees. So we were doing free delivery anywhere in the city, any quantity. So you can order a 4-pack and one of us would drive it straight down to you. We figured at that point we could be sitting and doing nothing, or we could get together and try to find a way to keep ourselves busy. And at that time, I just quit my main job. Like a month before COVID hit, I quit my regular job to put a ton of emphasis into bringing this brand to the next level. And there was 3 of us sitting in this room after we've laid off the vast majority of our employees, putting the word out that we'll be doing deliveries. And I think in that first week, we were in the 400, 500, 600 deliveries. So we were traveling all over the city. It was 7 days a week and 8-hour days of just driving beer around to everyone who was off work at home doing nothing at the moment. So at that point, we sort of kept upscaling our canning. We eventually bought our own canning line. The branding and how we presented ourselves didn't change much. We were able to get our brand on a can quite easily. It worked out really well for us because of that sort of iconic representation of all these beers. And what we had to do was sort of innovate a lot more. So we were doing new beers at least once every couple of weeks just to kind of keep the excitement going. And it changed the face of our business and how we ran. So when COVID started to let down and tap rooms are starting to open again and people are starting to be out again, we went from being a majority draft brewery to doing heavy retail focused brand. So we were doubling our size basically as we moved forward. Since then, we've built quite a big sales team. A lot of our employees that were doing bartending or working with us, great people that represented our brand really well. They ended up becoming sales reps for us. So we just really hit the ground running once everything started going again. What comes first, the beer or the name? And we haven't had a formula yet, so it works both ways. Sometimes you come in with a great name. I got a list on my phone, just a list of terrible names, but some of them might hit, and then a list of just ideas, and sometimes it's mix and match depending on how it goes. And we come from a company of really strong thinkers. As a owner organized and owner operated company, our brewer feels really strongly about where the beer is going to go. I feel really strongly where the marketing and branding will go, and operationally they have an idea about how it's going to go. So we butt heads in a way that is super healthy and allows us to build something super strong. So everyone's pulling for this is the kind of beer we need to put out, this is the timing for it, and this is how it's going to look. And I think that's what makes us a great company. We operate a lot like a band, and we've done well. I mean, if anyone's ever recorded an album before, if you can even put yourself into the shoes of someone creating music, it's a room full of producers, engineers, and 4 band members, and they all have different ideas. So we've done well collaborating, kind of fighting for things without being overly emotional about our ideas. Yeah, Happy Beer Street is great. When we first started, we were the second brewery on the street. So Alley Cat's been around for quite a while, and we're about 3-4 blocks away from them. There was nothing else here. It's sort of an industrial, low level, low commercial industrial area. And once all these other breweries started popping up, like Omen and Long Roof and Bedstick ended up moving down here, we found it, integral to kind of build a neighborhood for it. People were already coming to our tap room, and they were already going to Alley Cat without much else happening around here. And once other breweries came down, we're all going to each other's tap rooms and having drinks. So it felt right to kind of let the people know that a place like this exists. So it went from about three, four breweries to at this point about nine, and it's going to continue to grow, I think. And overall, it's just been a great way to get people to come out and try craft beer. With our branding and can artwork for our beers, we really focus on building central images that really represent the feeling of the beer. So we tried really hard to, toe the line between being super representational with what the beer, what you're going to taste, and what you want, but and what you see. And I think when it comes down to it, we wanted to create a feeling over top of literal representations of what you're drinking. A good example of that is the Prairie Fairy. That was a project that we did with Fruit Loop Society, which is an LGBTQ plus organization, not for profit, that puts on events. Um, and what we wanted to do was build something that was interesting, that beer drinkers can get behind, and that new people getting into beer could get behind as well. So it initially kind of started. We didn't have the name yet. It initially started with, in this case, the beer itself. So we experimented with a wheat-based beer, and then I remember when we first built it, it was a blackberry wheat ale, and the blackberry itself doesn't impart a lot of color. So what you got was sort of just this flat yellow liquid that wasn't too inspired. So once we started adding a raspberry to it to kind of give it that color, it created this really opaque pink, and that sort of set us off in this world of like, well, how do we match the branding to represent the beer, but also to represent Fruit Loop Society in an interesting way. So we ended up collaborating with them quite a bit, and we sat down with them, and it was them who brought the name Prairie Fairy to the mix, which at the time was a very specific name that some would say was once derogatory in the prairies here, but they've sort of owned it in a way that it makes it empowering. So we wanted to carry that forward. Initially, they wanted to introduce the idea of having a drag queen on a beer, which I think is quite progressive, and you don't really see that in beer brandings, put a drag queen straight on it. And we created this sort of, I'd say, like a Freddie Mercury mixed character in a traditional tattoo style, of a mustache, lipstick, wearing eyeshadow, being fairy of sorts, and we didn't know how it was going to hit. And I think for the first year it was interesting because it's a pink beer, that's super fruity tasting, and a lot of people didn't know how to feel about it. But once they tasted it and once they got behind it, it just kind of blew up, and it's one of our best selling beers, and it's hard to not like it. And I think people are getting over sort of the phobias of the type of beer they should drink and what the imagery on the beer should be, and it's been accepted, and it's been an awesome product for us. Uh, um, as a as just people in general, there between me, Ian, and Jay, and Taylor, we were uh, huge proponents of growth just because of how we grew up in playing music, and we didn't necessarily always want to be the biggest brewery, but we always wanted to be the most seen. Uh, and I think from the get go, our idea is that if we could sell a lot of beer, then we can do whatever we want. We can make whatever beers we want. We can collaborate with whoever we want, and it gives us the freedom to be creative. So we always had this idea of growth, to a certain point. I mean, we were surprised on how well it worked out, but once the ball started rolling and we realized that we had really great beers, really great branding, and we were able to encourage people to come out to the tap rooms and drink beer, we immediately started thinking about like what's the next move. This tap room here was seats about maybe 50, 58 people comfortably, um, which is quite small, and we've been filling it up quite a bit. So the idea is to find it sort of like an outpost where we can open up a little R&D facility, just so we can test out new flavors in a smaller space and introduce beer to a market that might not be as inclined to drink craft beer. So Beaumont was our second location, and to a lot of people that was a crazy move to go into an outskirts sort of suburb of of Edmonton to a population that's not that big. We saw it as an opportunity to bring beer to this different sector. And what we didn't realize back then that made a lot of sense after we opened the tap room is that we were also servicing a ton of the suburbs in South Edmonton, which was a heavily growing market. And in Beaumont, right when we started building out there, they went from a town to an official city, and there was a ton of support there. We had also some friends that lived close by, and some friends that opened up a business called Chartier, a restaurant, a French Canadian inspired restaurant that was doing quite well with a lot of community support. So we figured if we built something unique and interesting, that we would be able to test sort of our marketing capabilities in a market that wasn't looking for craft beer. I think we've done quite well with it. The scariest part was we opened Beaumont about a year and a bit after the Edmonton tap room was open, and then about 8 months in, I believe, COVID hit. So it took us a long time to figure out, where that tap room sat, if it was worthwhile or not. But I think over the past 4 years, we've really created a strong community tie between the brewery and the town of Beaumont, and it's been a very fruitful and amazing test of the brand. We're always in the mindset that everything is a yes until it's a no. So we've been looking at spaces everywhere. We've toyed with, the possibility of opening in Calgary a tap room as well. We haven't quite found the right space, but we're always looking, and at this point, it's just a matter of finding the right feel, and we'll be on it. Yeah, Shitty's Distilling was a fun idea that we've pushed around a lot. And initially, it wasn't a distillery at all. We had really funny ideas of opening like a pizza by the slice spot. We made a lot of jokes about the name Shitties, which was Shiddy, and it's a Irish last name. And we always felt like it'd be a really funny sort of like TGI Fridays kind of bar. So, about a year ago, when COVID was sort of ending, we were taking a close look at where our beer sales were going, what kind of demographic was interested in our beers. And we felt like there was an untapped market for some of the younger or more health conscious drinkers who wanted lower calorie products. They weren't into beer as much. So we were thinking, how do we capture that? And I think distilling has always been in the back of our heads an interesting place to get into. And we wanted to do some of the bigger items like making whiskeys or gin, vodka, interesting things like that we like to drink. And the sort of quickest way to get into the industry as a distiller and figure out if our brand is going to make it is to experiment with vodka sodas. So we put out quite a bit of flavors. We're sort of experimenting as we put them out. So we did these initial set of under 100 calories, slim cans with really subtle but interesting flavors. So we'd usually take a fruit and then add some sort of herbal elements. So whether it be rosemary or mint or anything like that, just to kind of create sort of a soda-based cocktail in a can. Right from the get-go, as a brand, we knew that beer is all about experience. I mean, apart from making good beer, the difference between good beer and great beer, I think, is based off of the experience you have with it. So we're hugely connected to the music industry, and that's sort of a part of our life and organization. So it didn't really leave when we started Sea Change. We put our beer out at a lot of venues and a lot of bars that we were familiar with, and it just seemed right to connect music to our brand. Even in our first year of operation as a tap room, we had connections with a couple smaller venues, and we brought in some pretty large bands to do secret shows. We were putting Our Lady Peace into a room with 80 people. Al King came and played for 70 people, and it was just jam packed and a lineup out the door. And we launched the beers with it, and we created sort of an environment of just unprecedented surprise, I guess, in some ways. No one saw it coming. We felt really good about that. COVID slowed us down quite a bit for it, but now that we're coming out of COVID, we've partnered up with Sonic 102 for these sort of taproom events that we do. So when a bigger artist comes into town and they're willing to visit and do a couple side shows for the radio and for us, they'd come down to our tap room and do a little acoustic session here, and we visit with like a 20-30 people room. So that's been super great for us. And then since day one of the brewery, we've always wanted to throw some sort of festival. A punk festival has been on the line for a long time. It took a lot of trial and error. I remember we initially started it probably the second year that we were operating, and it was just way too much to handle right off the bat, and COVID hit, so it's been postponed for about 3 years. Last year, once we got back rolling post-COVID, we threw our first Super Friendly Fest, which was at that time a 2-day festival, and it was just loaded with bands that haven't played in a long time, and because of COVID, but also because they haven't been around to play shows. So we kind of got this dream list of just the most incredible bands that we loved and that we wanted to put on. So we were able to do that we were able to create this festival that was exactly the way we wanted to experience beer. At that same time, we launched a non-alcoholic beer called Straight Edge, which is, for anyone who knows, is quite the sort of homage to the punk scene with the Straight Edge Brewing, which is a not drinking even drugs kind of. And so we launched that the day of the event, and it was just huge for the community. I mean, at this point, most punks going to these shows and seeing these bands that we like are aging punks, so they appreciated the non-alcoholic church. And since then, we just kind of went hard, and we started working with partners with Great Outdoors Comedy Fest to be their main supplier, and the Fringe is our newest addition to our festival lineup, and then putting on the second year of Super Friendly. We just finished up this year, and thank you, that year was great. For Sea Change Brewing Co., we've always had the idea as well to experiment with art and find ways to advertise without buying advertisement. And one of the ways we did it was through art murals. Since then we've done probably about 10 different murals, starting with inside the tap room, but now it's sort of exploded outside of the tap room. So we've been did a huge mural, a couple of youth murals on White Hat for the brand, for Sea Change, as well as a bunch of bars around town as well. So that's just been part of our identity. We took a page from Phillips Brewing, which has been a huge brewery that I looked up to quite a while, and they've introduced a ton of artists within their own company, and I feel like that's a great way to keep a craft brewery craft, is to bring craftspeople into the business in all different forms, and art is a huge part of that. So the commercial hotel, that was one of our big ones that we did during COVID, actually. So, to put a huge skeleton drinking a beer on the side of the building is quite awesome.
Daniel Wood, I'm the head brewer with Sea Change Brewing Co. We're a craft brewery in Edmonton, Alberta. I oversee a team managing production. I also deal with recipe development and some of the other creative aspects of our beer production. We source our ingredients mostly through Alberta maltsters. We're lucky here that being blessed with such great agriculture all around. We have a lot of small craft maltsters that we like to work with on our more on our rotational series and smaller batch things. Then we deal with some larger Alberta maltsters on our core brands as well. We deal with Red Shed Malting, Origin, and Hogarth for our small maltsters, craft maltsters that we prefer to deal with when we can. And then we deal with RAR on a larger scale. Most of our hops come from outside of Canada. We would love to see more Alberta growers with the varieties that we tend to use. I believe it's in a fledgling state here in Alberta currently. I'd love to grow our own eventually as well. We use all kinds of different adjunct grains in several of our brands. We use predominantly Alberta barley and wheat. We do source some corn and rice for some of our lagers as well. A couple of our mainstay beers that are sort of our ones helped us make our name would be the Wolf is our biggest seller. It's a hazy pale ale, uh, medium ABV, lots of body, lots of fruity tropical notes. That one is like most of our core beers. We aim for exciting yet very crushable, very approachable beers. We're not trying to completely redefine styles with those ones, but execute them very highly, very consistently. Prairie Fairy is another well-known brand of ours. That was our fruited wheat beer. It uses tons and tons of blackberry and raspberry. We get puree from the Okanagan for that. They go in the tanks we use now. They're going in by the drum load, so it's a pretty obscene amount of fruit that goes into those. But all natural products, so it has a little bit of change from season to season that we're always dialing in and adapting to. In terms of the creative decisions, that's pretty much a group decision. Often the sales team or the ownership will say, we need a beer to put in this slot, and then I'll raise my hand, put up an idea, or we'll consult as a team, bounce some ideas around. I think that's the thing that I like most working at Sea Change. It's very, very collaborative. Everybody helps in multiple departments, but also every idea is worth listening to. Yeah, yeah. There's often we'll have I've got a list of names that I'm always pulling from, especially on my really small batch release stuff. I'm like, does this fit that brand? Does this fit? And but those I probably have 150 names to choose from, and then some of them will never see light. There are often times where we'll have a beer in the works for a while, and until the last minute, there's no name as well. So it can go both ways for us. We tend to brew what we're into, what we're excited about. Lately, we've been brewing a ton of lagers. Our brewers are very excited about lagers, as always. So we've put out 3 of those in a row. But we do listen to the market. We never want to produce anything that we're not excited to put our name on either. We don't chase fads. We like everything to become a mainstay for us. Most of the things that we release at a certain scale, we are prepared to make them a core brand if we're putting our name on them. Here at our OG tap room, we have our pilot system. So this allows us to be very flexible, try out new ideas, things that are really sort of on the edges of what we're releasing. So typically tap room only releases come out of here, or just proof of concept. We'll try a recipe here 5 or 6 times, and nobody will ever see it until it's the right thing. We are doing a bit of development on our non-alcoholic program here as well, doing some NA beers. Very small manual system here. And then thankfully our stuff scales pretty well to our big system as well. Small adjustments get made. But our big system at the production brewery, we're doing 2,500 liter batches. Now we're turning 3 of those each day. So we're producing 7,500 liters a day, 5 days a week currently. The reason we chose the equipment, we chose both efficiency and quality. We have the ability to produce a wide variety of beers, and we have the ability to turn around quickly. So Shitty's is our production facility. It brews all of Sea Change's beer outside of what we use contract partners for. We're basically growing that facility to bring all of our production into one space. So we have our 2,500 liter brew house there, and about 20 fermenters and bright tanks, and our packaging facility is there as well. Yeah, a few cringe moments would be trying to do things too quickly. Anytime we're training a new brewer or bringing someone else onto the team, I'm constantly reminding them, slow down, take an extra step. Yes, we want to move quickly, but anything faster than a certain point is unsafe or can be disastrous for the product. And I've had a few where I've turned the wrong valve or left the wrong valve open, and all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, you realize something's going down the drain that shouldn't be, or something's getting mixed that shouldn't be. Thankfully, nothing to the point where we had to dump a batch of beer down the drain yet, though. Yeah, I come from a homebrewing background. I had a previous career in commercial photography, so I worked in advertising and editorial. little bit of motion directing as well. So the jump into the beer world was pretty natural for me, being both technical and creative. I was self-taught. I homebrewed for 12 years or so before I decided to give brewing professionally a try. My first brewing job was down the street at Alley Cat. I worked there briefly, and then opening came along with Sea Change, and I jumped on that when they were building up the new facility. I think the main reason that I do what I do is to put a bit of myself into the product. It's like hosting a dinner party. You want people to enjoy what you make. The creative aspect of this job is paramount for me. Getting to solve problems creatively and technically is huge. I'm very fortunate that a lot of my personality gets to come through in our product and some of our branding, some of the brands that I've helped develop. I've been able to collaborate on the branding and the naming of as well. A very productive team, and the more collaborative nature of the business is why another huge part of why I'm here. I came from a very collaborative background, and working with other breweries that would be deemed competition is now they're our friends, and we get to help each other out. Having a handful of breweries down the street from us or next door to us, I always found it very interesting that those businesses would set up side by side, and I get it. It's great. We have the best neighbors. I think there's a lot of room. I think that you look at other cities or places with higher population density and the per capita breweries. I think we're not there yet. I think that people will keep striving to define little new niches within that, and there's lots of room. I don't really view anybody as competition. We've got a lot of good friends.
All right, so this is our canning line. This is our second canning line we've ever bought. I wasn't around for this, but the first time we got a canning line, I think it did about a flat every 5 minutes. And I think they announced that they were doing their own cans. So people were lining out the door, but they couldn't keep up to the demand. So they were basically canning as ordered, which was pretty funny. So I think they did that once or twice. And they're like, we need something faster. So this is the line we got. This is a 40 can a minute wild goose filler. It can be operated by 2 operators. Yeah, we got our decal over here. We got the coater that puts a coat on the bottom of the can. We have a twist rinse that turns the cans upside down. They get rinsed out, and then we'll go around to the other side where the filler is. And right now we're doing Fairy. On any given day, we can do about 100 hect tank, which is these 2 big ones here. And if you, so I like, they're 100 hex, and a hectoliter, a heck is a hectoliter. Hectoliter is 100 liters. And so when I say 100 hex, sometimes people don't really grasp like what that is. So when I kind of put it this way, if you and some buddies had 8 beers a week, let's say you drank 1 beer a day and 2 on Saturday, you and 2 buddies did that, like, to get rid of one of these tanks, it would take you 16 years to get rid of one of these tanks with just drinking a flat a week. So it's quite a lot of beer. And we'll do one of these tanks in a day on this machine here, all into cans. So we'll sneak around to the other side now. I was gonna get this going to film it. So yeah, they come in, they get blasted with CO2 down here. It fills the can with CO2, or like from the bottom up, so that it's not filling just into air, because air is like the killer of beer. And then these guys, they go down, they fill, they open up at the bottom, they start filling from the bottom up, and they continue filling even as they're coming out. so that when the tube comes out, it's not just replaced by air. Then they come under here. There's a little CO2 hood. Make sure that nothing's going to get into the can. Lids drop on. Then they go through what's called double seam process. So one operation, it turns the can and lid from this to this, and then the second one just squishes those two down. So, and that's how you get a nice airtight can. And yeah, we're running at about 34 cans a minute right now.
Yeah, so we're currently standing in the cellar here at Shitty's or Sea Change. Our fermenters range in size from 2,500 liters to 10,000 liters. Once the brew day is over, we cool the wort into these fermenters. They spend anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the brand here. Lagers take longer than that, of course. And our cellar hands here are continually monitoring and doing other processes like dry hopping, things like that, adding fruit for our fruit beers. But yeah, most of our brands are in the cellar for 2 to 3 weeks.
The process begins on the far side of the brewery in our mill room, where we mill the malts. That's basically crack open the husk and render the starch granules accessible. Then it comes through this auger line down into the mash tun. It gets hydrated as it comes in, and that begins our mash rest. Basically, we're allowing the mash to rest at a certain temperature, at a certain pH, for a certain amount of time, in order for the enzymes in the malt to take those starch granules and break them down into various sugars that are either more fermentable or less fermentable. Once that has gone on for long enough, then we begin the physical separation of the liquid phase from the physical phase, and that's called our sparge. Literally, we are like laundering the mash in a sense. We will filter out the liquid, allow it to run off into the boil kettle, and then in order to capture the residual sugars that still remain in the malts, we're going to pour more water on top of it. And that process lasts anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. And as we're doing that, we're filling the kettle. And obviously, once the kettle is full, we begin our boil. At that point, while this is boiling, we'll begin cleaning out the mash tun, which is the part of the process that you can see Scott doing right now. And once it's clean, then we do it all again and overlap multiple brews, one sort of riding on the coattails of the other.